Hi, this is Stuart Solwin, and I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale. And in this video, we're going to be talking about what you need to know if you're facing criminal charges for a first-time DUI here in Arizona. We'll be talking about what counts as a DUI, the jail time and the fines you could be facing, how this can affect your driver's license, and finally we'll discuss some ways that you can defend against these charges if you have been arrested. So let's start with discussing exactly what counts as a first-time DUI in Arizona. You can pick up a DUI for driving while under the influence of either alcohol or a listed drug. And under Arizona law, most first-time DUI charges are going to be labeled as Class 1 misdemeanors, which is a certain category of crime. If you've been charged with an aggravated DUI, that will be a felony, but usually if this is your first DUI arrest, you're probably going to be facing misdemeanor charges. Now, typically if you're arrested for a DUI, you'll face at least two different types of DUI charges. Sometimes you could have more as well. But the first charge is going to be what's called the A1 charge. And it's called this because the charge comes from subsection A1 of the DUI statute, which is ARS 281381. Under an A1 charge, a person commits a DUI if they're driving or in actual physical control of a vehicle while being impaired to the slightest degree by either alcohol or a drug. For this charge, it doesn't technically matter whether your blood alcohol content, which is also called your BAC, was over the legal limit. If you're below the legal limit, this can certainly be an important piece of evidence in your case. But the question for this charge ultimately does not come down to whether or not you had a particular BAC, but rather whether you were impaired while you were driving. So somebody who has a lower tolerance for alcohol might become impaired even with a BAC under the legal limit. Likewise, it doesn't usually matter whether the drug in your system was prescribed or not for this A1 charge if you're arrested for a drug DUI, but rather the law looks at, again, whether the drug impaired your ability to drive to the slightest degree. So even if you have a valid prescription for a drug, and this can also include medical marijuana, it may still result in a DUI arrest if the drug impaired your ability to drive. So to sum up, all that matters for the A1 charge is the question of impairment. Did the drug or alcohol impair your ability to drive? This is in contrast to the second type of DUI charge that you may see, which is called the A2 charge. And this also gets its name from the subsection of the DUI statute where it comes from. Subsection A2. And under this law, a person can be charged with DUI for having a blood alcohol content, also known as BAC, over a 0.08. This is the legal limit in Arizona, and a person can be charged for this crime even if the alcohol in the person's system does not appear to affect their driving. So this is the opposite in some ways of the A1 charge, because with the A1 charge, impairment matters and nothing else. But with the A2 charge, the actual amount of alcohol in your system is what matters and nothing else. So in fact, sometimes people who have a high tolerance for alcohol might not be that visibly affected by a BAC of a 0.08, although for other people, the effects of that level of alcohol could be far more noticeable. Your BAC is going to be measured by a chemical test that was performed at the time of your DUI arrest, either in the form of a blood test or in the form of a breath test where the police have you blow into a machine to measure the alcohol in your system, whereas the blood test, the police draw blood directly from your vein. So these two charges give the state two different ways that they can try to convict somebody of a DUI, either the A1 charge or the A2 charge. And these are both often called a regular DUI in Arizona. But there are also different levels of alcohol-related DUIs that you could face if you have a BAC that's higher than a 0.08. The first of these is called an extreme DUI, and it's a DUI charge that you can face if the chemical tests show that your BAC was over a 0.15. Now, if your BAC was over a 0.20, then you can be charged with what is called a super extreme DUI. And this is the highest level for a misdemeanor first-time DUI charge in Arizona. Now, finally, if you have a blood test which comes back and you have a drug in your system that you do not have a prescription for, then you might be facing what is known as an A3 charge, and this is also called a drug DUI charge. And like the A2 charge for alcohol, under the drug DUI charge, it doesn't matter whether you are actually impaired or not by the drug. The question is only whether or not you had the drug in your system and whether you had a valid prescription for that drug. If you do have a valid prescription, then that will usually be a defense to the drug DUI charge. Now, let's take a look at the penalties for these different versions of first-time DUIs. As I said at the beginning of this video, all misdemeanor DUI crimes are charged as Class 1 misdemeanors. This means that they all carry a maximum penalty of 6 months in jail as well as $2,500 in fines. So for any misdemeanor DUI, you could receive up to 6 months of jail. However, what makes DUIs different from most other Class 1 misdemeanors is that in addition to having a maximum penalty, Arizona DUIs also have mandatory minimum penalties, meaning that depending on the type of DUI you're charged with, if you're convicted, the judge will have to impose at least a certain minimum sentence. Other Class 1 misdemeanors, you might receive no jail time at all, but that's not the case with DUIs. Those are treated special in the Arizona legal system. So let's talk about what these mandatory minimum penalties are. For a regular DUI and a drug DUI, the mandatory minimum penalty is $1,250 in fines as well as 10 days of jail. Now, this jail time can be reduced to 1 day of jail if the defendant completes a drug and alcohol screening. The court can impose a punishment that's higher than this, but it can't impose any punishment that's lower. For an extreme DUI, the mandatory minimum punishment is higher than for a regular DUI, so you'll be facing $2,500 in fines and 30 days in jail. The 30 days of jail can be reduced to 9 days if you install an ignition interlock device on your car. An ignition interlock device is something that you install in your car, and in order to get your car to start, it has you blow into the device to show that you don't have alcohol on your breath. And if you get this installed, your jail time can be reduced. And then finally, with a super extreme DUI, you'll be facing $2,750 in fines plus additional assessments, as well as 45 days in jail. But again, if you get an ignition interlock device installed on your car, the jail time can be reduced to 14 days. Now, in addition to the criminal punishment you could receive for a DUI conviction, a DUI is also going to have consequences for your driver's license. Arizona has what's called an automatic license suspension process for anybody who is arrested for a DUI. This is the admin per se suspension. And if you've been arrested for a DUI, you'll probably get a form from the police called the admin per se form. And what happens with this process is that 15 days after you're arrested for a DUI, your license will automatically be suspended for a minimum of 90 days. However, if your attorney files a motion with the Department of Transportation before that 15th day, then your license suspension can be put on hold by the Department of Transportation until a hearing is held to determine whether the police had reason to believe that you were impaired when they arrested you. This can result in either your license not getting suspended, or at the very least, you having additional time to drive before the automatic 15-day suspension goes into effect. If during your DUI arrest, however, you refuse to perform a chemical test as requested by the police, then under Arizona law, your license can actually be revoked for an entire year. This revocation can also be put on hold, however, if your attorney files the appropriate motions. Okay, so that's all the bad news, and clearly there are a lot of negative consequences for being arrested for a DUI. But that doesn't mean that if it happened to you, that your situation is going to be hopeless. There's a number of defenses to DUI, even if you did have alcohol in your system while you were driving. At my firm, we've been able to get charges reduced or dismissed entirely using some of these defenses, but of course, keep in mind that the effect of these will depend on your specific situation. You can have a defense to a DUI charge if your constitutional rights were violated during the DUI arrest, such as your right to remain silent or your right to an attorney. Also, it can be a defense to a charge if the police did not have reasonable suspicion to pull your car over in the first place. So for these reasons, we always want to look at how the police identified your car, the reason for the traffic stop, and how they treated you during your encounter with them. Beyond that, there can also be problems with how the police performed the field sobriety tests, or how they administered the breath or blood test to measure your BAC. These chemical tests can also be prone to certain errors in measurement, and they also have a built-in margin of error, meaning that the number on your chemical test might actually be lower than the reading on the sheet, even assuming that the test worked as it was intended. So if you have been arrested for a DUI, you can give my law firm a call and we'll talk to you about your case to see what defenses might apply to you and what potential next steps can be taken to help protect your license as well as your freedom. My firm offers consultations that are free on criminal cases, and if you've been charged with a DUI, we'd be happy to talk with you. So feel free to give us a call. Otherwise, I hope this video has been helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.